During the Age of Dark, when the land and sky were ashen and barren, before Gwyn and his knights battled the great drakes, the world of Lordran underwent a change that is not easily acknowledged by the inexperienced player. Lordran would undergo a hidden transformation and gain a hidden quality. This quality would be the fact that everyone has a life expectancy of 30 seconds, holy crap! At this point in time, pretty much everyone knows what Dark Souls is. So many people love the series, and to be honest, that's because there's not much to hate about it. But if there's one thing I do hate about the Soulsborne series, it's how drastic people's opinions are on it. You've got one guy over here saying Dark Souls is the hardest game ever, while some Chad over here says it's easy and that everyone else is just bad at games. If you walk around saying Dark Souls is a complete cakewalk, you are officially that guy. Congratulations, you've now earned yourself a place in the 8th layer of hell. Oh, you thought there were 7? Well, guess what, now there's one more. All the elitist gamers have to go somewhere. Nonetheless, Dark Souls is definably hard from any perspective. For casual players it's hard, for Souls veterans it's hard, albeit easier, and it's especially hard for newcomers. But, what exactly makes Dark Souls hard? Dark Souls is hard for a myriad of reasons. Whether it's because every enemy has the potential to kill you, or because you don't know how to properly navigate the menus in the beginning, the games are just plain difficult. Even borderline frustrating, if you will. However, after spending centuries in a sealed dungeon with nothing but a PS4 and a copy of Dark Souls 3, I finally discovered the true cause of Dark Souls difficulty. But before we go further, I gotta establish something that will make explaining all this much easier. The average Dark Souls player begins as a newcomer, reaches casual rank after one playthrough of any of the Souls games, and then reaches veteran rank after completing multiple playthroughs of the same Souls game, other Souls games, or both. I mean, there's also Mega God tier rank, but we're talking about the average player here. Much like how this is still the beginning of the video, we're gonna start at the beginning of the spectrum in terms of difficulty. Imagine you just bought Dark Souls 3, and you're starting it up for the very first time. You're walking through the untended graves, taking in the scenery and fighting off baddies until you reach Iudex Gundyr, the first boss of the game. Then, within the first 30 seconds of the fight, you get your ass completely whooped. And then, you look up how to beat Iudex Gundyr on YouTube. I'm just kidding, please spare me. Now, let's rewind this whole scene back to the very beginning, but this time, you're a Dark Souls vet. You know this place like the back of your hand, you know where every enemy is in the area, you get all of the secret items, and you even know where that crazy crystal lizard thing is, and you kill it because it drops good loot. Then, you make it to Iudex Gundyr, and this time, you whoop his ass. You're parrying him left and right, and he can't even touch you. And you swiftly beat him without a care in the world. Alright, now what was the difference between this guy's playthrough and this guy's playthrough? Unfamiliarity. Unfamiliarity is precisely the reason why so many players die over and over and over again in their first foray into Dark Souls. This is also the reason why so many players give up early on. Some people just assume that they don't get the game, or they just get too frustrated and stop before they're ready to throw their controller through a wall. It takes time and perseverance to familiarize yourself with every challenge you come across in these games. But once you get them down, you don't forget them. This is why veterans have a much easier time when they come back to the games on subsequent playthroughs. They know where everything is and know the strategies for taking on every boss like the back of their hands. Oh. Not convinced yet? Well, let me show you my in-game hours for Dark Souls 3. On my first playthrough, I put in 40 hours. And on my second, I only put in 16. That's a 24-hour time difference. That's literally an entire day. On my first playthrough, I had no clue what I was doing, and over half of the bosses chopped me up, baked me at 350, and served me with extra olive oil just because I was so bad. Then, on my second playthrough, I was whizzing through every area. I knew where everything was, only 1 or 2 bosses actually gave me trouble, and I was done with the game before I even knew it. All of this is why Miyazaki and the dudes at FromSoft are geniuses. Because there's such a steep learning curve, in order to succeed, you have to get used to everything, and learn, maybe even memorize, locations, enemy attack patterns, your movesets, and maybe even the game's menus. This is how they get you. After being beaten down so badly, the natural reaction is to fight back. So you learn everything you need to progress, and in the process, you ever so slowly invest yourself deeper and deeper into the game world and its lore. It's almost as if the more you know about Dark Souls, the more invested you are and the more fun you have. Eventually, it becomes more and more apparent that the further you get in one of the games, the more enjoyable the experience as a whole becomes. It feels awesome near the ends of the games when you finally get the hang of things and actually start to succeed more than you fail. And furthermore, because you get so invested, it feels really satisfying to learn about a place early in the game in an item description or a cutscene or something, and then you actually end up in that place. In terms of actually completing one of the Souls games, completing your first Souls game is something you won't forget soon afterward. It's such a satisfying event. All of your hard work has paid off as you slowly realize the grandiosity of the adventure you just took part in. And if that Souls game had any impact on you at all, you're very likely to come back to it eventually. As I said earlier, once you return to a Dark Souls game again after beating it once, everything gets massively easier. As a Souls player, that's actually one of the most fun things to do. It's always a good time to revisit a Souls game you've beaten in the past because you can play through it again and have a completely different experience. There's so much variety in character creation and build making that you could most likely play the same Souls game 6 or 7 times over and get a fresh experience every single time. And also, returning to your favorite Soulsborne game is still entertaining because Dark Souls, albeit having a difficulty mostly affected by unfamiliarity, is naturally difficult on its own, and still leaves room for a challenge in later playthroughs. Interestingly, when Souls veterans decide to play through a Souls game that they have never played before, they have to undertake the process of overcoming unfamiliarity once again, albeit with hardened skills and a general knowledge of Soulsborne. No matter what your skill level is, and whether or not you're like this guy, or even this guy, you have to partake in this process with every new Souls game you play. In the end, all of this is why unfamiliarity makes Soulsborne so hard to get into and so great to revisit. Dark Souls will forever be a fantastic game series that cleverly engrosses you in its world through trial and error, slowly pulling you in upon every new discovery and every victory. Although unfamiliarity may scare some newcomers off, if you stay determined and allow yourself to dive into the experience that is Dark Souls, you won't regret your choice. Maybe after Ornstein and Smough you will, or maybe after the Twin Princes, or maybe after the Ruined Sentinels, but in the end, you will have experienced a game from one of the most well-renowned series in the history of the medium. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.